Good morning, and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I am located at 1563 Main Street in Peckville, and I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. to give landowners valuable information you need regarding natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. And at the Clark Law Firm, my focus is solely and entirely on landowner negotiation and representation. I represent landowners for such items as gas leasing, pipeline agreements. I'm going to talk about pipeline agreements today, and in particular one, and I'm also going to talk about landmen today. Also, royalty issues, and I will be talking about, so if you're tuning in to hear about royalty issues, I will be talking about royalty issues in the upcoming weeks for certain. But today, I'm going to do a lot of talking about pipelines and also landman relationships. I also represent clients for estate planning. And another thing, I've been consulted, I've done shows on this for landowners who are interested in selling their oil and gas rights. And as you know, if you're out there and you're in an area where you have natural gas potential, you may be receiving and probably are receiving multiple correspondence and letters from these companies asking to or making you an offer seeking to buy your oil, gas, and mineral rights. Again, I've done shows on this. I encourage you to go back. You can go back, check out the shows at pagasleaseattorney.com. You can check them out at YouTube. Go back, check out the shows on this subject, and I'll do more, I'm sure, in the future. But the most important thing is, please, and this fits into the landman aspect that I'm going to talk about today, do not simply just sign these documents. Even if you are interested and you think it's a good price, get some help, understand what these documents say, these agreements for sale, the agreement that you're entering into to sell your oil and gas and mineral rights. And everyone that I've seen, I have had significant objections to the actual documents and the terms in the agreement for sale. And in every case, the company or individuals, whoever it is seeking to buy the oil and gas rights and mineral rights, have agreed to modify that document. Same thing with the deeds. We want to make sure that if you're selling these rights, that you're having your deed as tight as it can be to benefit you and not the company, and provide more rights or abilities to the company to operate, the company being the company is going to purchase your gas rights, than what you need to do. So you want to make sure that if you're going to do this, you need to button up these documents to make sure that you're not giving the company more than what you need to do, and also allowing all these loopholes for the company to back out, to kind of have you under this burden of this agreement and sitting out there for many, many months more than what you might anticipate, and certainly what they're telling you. This will be a repeated theme. The landman and the person who's coming out to you to have you sign documents, whether, I don't care what it is, gas lease, pipeline agreement, buy your mineral rights, well pad, all of those things. That person works for the company. That person works for the company and not for you. I'm looking here. I'm 3.5 minutes into the show from my end here, and I'm already getting fired up. I'm going to tell you this too. I woke up this morning. I was a little tired, I got to be honest. I've been working so hard on this website, the whole revamping. I'm very excited about that. A lot of work on that, working on the royalty issues. A lot of deadlines here at year end where companies are trying to get things done. Landowners are trying to get things done. So it's been a very hectic few weeks. So I was like, you know what? Maybe today I'm just going to go ahead and run a rerun, catch up on some of this work. I'm a little bit behind on my Christmas shopping as well, which my lovely wife is always reminding me about. But I was going to run a rerun, and I said, you know what? I'm so fired up about some things that have occurred over this past week with landmen. And also, as I'm working on this website, I'm going back, I'm looking at some of these earlier blogs that I did. And I'll tell you, definitely, everyone listening, definitely go back and check out the blogs on the websites, especially on the PA Gas Lease Attorney website. I'll be honest, I didn't even realize. I remember as I'm going back through, and I'll tell you, I'm updating them I'm editing these blogs, and we're going to re-release them on a new website and bring them up to more current status. And I really encourage people to check those out. There is so much information there, and a lot of it, again, whether you call me or not, it is valuable information to get you thinking, or even get your attorney thinking, whoever's representing you, if you have an attorney, and you should have an attorney. And one of the themes that keeps coming up throughout the website, and very rightfully so, I'm driving this website, I'm producing this website, I'm writing the content for the website. And one of the things that consistently I keep coming back to is that the landman works for the company, not for you. And I said, I was looking at maybe running the rerun this week, and then I was reminded because something had me so fired up this week. And here's what happened. So I have a client who I represented once. They had contacted me to do a pipeline right-of-way agreement. We did a pipeline right-of-way agreement. It's a strong document. However, in this particular case, if you're a regular listener, I talk about leverage all the time. What can we do for you? What is your leverage? How can we maximize your situation in these negotiations? And then, of course, obviously, whatever you want to do and your personal feeling and belief, and whether you want to push harder, you don't want to push so hard, whether you want to say no, all those are your decisions. The idea is to give you the good quality information to allow you to evaluate your options and make the right decision for you and this particular circumstance. And again, I can almost, as I'm saying these things, I can see myself typing them into these documents to put up onto the websites, because I say this all the time, and it's because I believe in it. It's because what you need to know as landowners. You have your own personal situation, your age, children, your employment, your savings, all of that type of situation, your economic situation, your life situation is always going to be unique for you, and it's going to evolve over time. Your situation today may be different than 5 years, and that can just happen in normal, everyday life. But your situation today and in 5 years into the future, if you're a person who now is getting royalties where you weren't 5 years ago, or maybe you aren't, and maybe you lost your job, and maybe there's problems, well, that situation is always changing, and sometimes it's changing significantly. But that is your personal situation that factors in to your decision. It has to, it should, and it has to. Then we turn and we say, okay, well, you have that situation where you are, and then we have this particular agreement that you're being offered. And then it becomes, okay, well, let's talk about the specifics of this agreement. Now, a company is normally going to hand you their form document in all cases, pretty much. Maybe they throw a couple addendum terms out there to make you think that you're getting something, and sometimes they have value. We certainly want to have addendum terms, but we want to make sure that we have quality addendum terms, not just addendum terms that the company landman and the company is throwing to you to make you think that you have something of consequence. We want to make sure that you have something of value. So that document that's presented to you is a unique offer. And when I say unique, even though the forms may be the same, and maybe the compensation that they offered everybody to start, and they generally do, is always going to be the same to start, but certainly you can negotiate that. You also look at, do you have a map? Where is this location going to be? So if the proposed right-of-way in a pipeline example is in the back corner of their property, you never see it, well, then that's a unique situation, as opposed to maybe it's going right through the center of your property and you're afraid about how it will impact, and rightfully so, concerned about how it will impact potential future development, the value of my property. So those are all going to be unique circumstances of that offer. Then on top of there, what can we do to make that offer better? And that's where it comes into, let's evaluate your leverage. The starting point is to understand, do you have the ability to say no to whatever is being offered? Roadway, pipelines, well site, meter site, anything. Do you have the ability to say no? And then if you do have the ability to say no, do you want to advance and move forward and continue discussions? Now, if you have an attorney, those discussions are probably going to will end up costing you some expense with your attorney and their involvement. However, you can minimize that and say, okay, well, yeah, I can say no. I'm interested in discussing these things. Well, what do you want to look at first? Location, compensation. Where is this proposed well pad? Where is this proposed roadway going to be located? Where is the proposed pipeline going to be located? If you don't agree to that location and you don't want it there and you can say no, you can end negotiations immediately and you have little to no expense. Then you flip over to compensation. Yeah, maybe this location is acceptable, but what they're offering just simply isn't worth it. It's not worth my aggravation. Think about this. You need to make sure that you're going to be protected from liability. You need to make sure that you're going to minimize the impact that's going to occur in your property. You also need to make sure that they're going to reclaim and repair and fix your property back to that original condition. And if they don't do that, now you have a problem that you have to address. So you have to think about that and say, with all these other things considered, is this something that I'm willing to do, and understanding that, hey, maybe there might be unforeseen problems that arise that you need to calculate into this process. Now, I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 on these stations. You can also check out the radio show at pagasleaseattorney.com. Again, new sites coming out very quickly, and excited about that. But talking now back to this landman situation and these offers. So when you're evaluating this offer, you need to understand that leverage. And most landowners, and it's taken me in this process and dealing with about 50 different pipeline companies across the state to really, it's like an art to understand leverage and try to evaluate it the best that we possibly can. And this has come from this wealth of knowledge and all of these negotiations. I'm not a genius. I didn't have my first negotiation. We were able to figure out every type of leverage and what we can do. My knowledge is constantly evolving. We're learning more. We're continuing to push and get better agreements as a general practice, especially in these pipeline and roadways. And there's this evolution of what's going on. So if you don't want to do something and you can say no, you just simply say no. Then what will happen is the company really wants to do it. Well, they'll come back to you. And typically, they'll start trying to throw some more money at you. At some point, maybe there's a price that this is worth doing. And then at that point, once you say, okay, you know what? I'm willing to do this at a certain price. I'm willing to agree to this activity at this location. Now we start diving into the actual terms, the language, the written words in the agreement, because those are extremely, extremely important. Okay, I'm bump against it. When we come back, I'm going to talk more about this. Don't miss this. This is extremely important no matter what type of agreement. I don't care if it's a leasing. I don't care if it's a well site. I don't care if it's a roadway, a pipeline, anything above ground. This is an important show. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9. I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. Again, I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. You can check out pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com, talking about pipelines a lot here today, but more about, landmen, but also pipelines. And you can always contact me directly, 570-307-0702. And not to make this too commercial, but if you have a pipeline right-of-way agreement, I don't care where you are. I've represented people in Greene County, which is the most southwestern county in Pennsylvania, all the way up to Wayne County, the northeasternmost county in Pennsylvania, and not all, but many, many places in between. So if you have a pipeline right-of-way agreement, you need to get good advice, and you need to get it early. And it usually, we can have like a little conference, a conference call, and say, hey, look, here's what you need to be looking at. Here's what my experience is with this company. Here's what my experience is with other companies, similar situation. Here's what your options are. Here's whether or not the company has the ability to do this and provide some guidance. And then if you want to just say, hey, look, I don't want to do this, then don't do it. If you say, hey, well, let's just do this. Let's draw a line in the sand and say the company's offering me $25,000. Well, I'll go back, or we'll go back, whoever wants to do this, go back to the company and say, listen, not really interested, but if you want to give me, say, $100,000, let's talk some more. From there, if they do come back, and if you're on this on your own, don't go any further, because $100,000, say they offered 25 and now they're offering 100,000. You need to be careful, because these flat numbers that's not always how things appear. You have typically these option payments. So the company pays you a much smaller amount of money up front, and then if they decide they want to use the agreement, then they'll pay a larger amount in the back end. You may say, oh, wow, they offered me 25, 100,000. Hey, that's great. But then the question is, how many pipelines can they put in? How many times can they come back and forth and dig up and put in pipelines? Can they put things above ground? Can they put any electric poles? Can they put guy wires? What can they do in this circumstance? So the idea of just saying, well, 100,000 sounds great. Yeah, but there are a lot of other things that we need to look at. Can they put a roadway there? What can they do? And then you want to make sure that you're going to be limiting that. But the first step, like I said before, 2 steps. Well, first step is this. Can you say no? Do you want to continue discussions? If you do, then we want to look at where is the proposed activity going to be located and what will be the compensation payments. Compensation payments, though, sounds pretty simple. There's also, how are these payments going to be structured? What are you going to get up front? What are you going to get if they elect to exercise the option or install the pipeline or roadway? Then, if they put in more lines, what are you going to get? There are so many ways that you can limit a company's activity, and you need to be aware of them, and very few people are. Quite frankly, very few people are. So I'm going back now a little bit. So we talk about the landman. I started telling you, I had this client. I did a pipeline right away agreement with them, for them, negotiated with the company, got the best possible agreement. But in that particular case, our leverage was limited. And that's always the first conversation that I have with all of my clients. Let's talk about your options here. And let's talk about, do you even want to proceed? I've said this before. I will always say this. My job is to help people. My job is never to take advantage of anybody, and certainly not my clients. My job is to help you. My job is not to give you some big legal bill or any legal bill and not do anything where I'm assisting you in some fashion. I'm never going to do that, ever. So, in this case, we talk about, okay, here's what these options are. Here's where you are. Let's go ahead and do the best possible agreement we can. If you have very little leverage and the company has the ability to do something, or say install a pipeline, there's almost always the ability to make this. And actually, in my situation, my experience, we've always been able to make the agreement better than what is being offered. Another unbelievably important concept, and I'm not going to go deep in this now, is sometimes it's not the worst thing in the world to allow the company to install a pipeline or a roadway, say, under the terms of your oil and gas lease. It is not always the worst thing. The company will threaten you. They'll say, oh, we're not threatening you, but we can do this. That's what they say to everybody. Everybody. So it's not always the worst thing. I had a client, he said, after a long time of having these discussions and going back and forth, the company kept changing things. It's funny, everything's so important it needed to get done a couple months ago. Now here we are a few months out, and the route has changed 3 or 4 times. Everything keeps changing from the company side. But when it came out to the landowner, they said, we need to get this done right away because we're going to start working right away. We need to do this. You're going to get big money. Here's the paperwork. Go ahead and sign. Now here we are. Things have changed so much. The route has shifted from thousands of feet to hundreds of feet to thousands of feet to hundreds of feet. And now, right on the eve of going ahead and moving forward, things changed again. So the landowner said, oh, you know what? I've had it. I've had enough. I'm not going to agree to this proposed agreement. So if you want to put it in under the gas lease, go ahead. But I'm not going to give you permission. But remember, if you put this in under my gas lease, if you install these pipelines under my gas lease, you have to follow my gas lease. In this case means you can't put any pipelines on my property that are not transporting my gas. Oh, and by the way, there's also limitations on the size of the easement. There's also my ability to have discussions and consent to the location. And actually, in this unique circumstance, there were terms that were going to preclude water lines, which the company really wanted. So you say, you know what, company? Fine. You've been threatening all this time. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to go under your lease. We're going to go under your lease. You know what? Fine. Go under the lease. Well, you know what happened then? Sheer panic on the company side. Hey, can I fly up from down south and meet with you guys? Can I meet with you guys? Well, I thought you were, a little bit ago, and for months now, you've been saying, we'll do it the lease. We'll put it under the lease. We'll put it under the lease. You've been throwing these threats out there. The second, the bluff, and it's not always a bluff, and that's why I say you got to understand your circumstances. But the second you say, you know what, fine, put him under the lease. Well, then, now they're scrambling, and circumstances have changed drastically. So it's not always the worst thing. Now, in this case, we had very positive things occurring, but unfortunately the company kept changing location and changing routes. So early on, normally this is a very rare circumstance where we have these continued discussions during this process, because normally this is something that we can figure out pretty early. But here, the location was worked out. Things were moving forward, and then the location changed. How many times do I tell everybody, location is so important. You need to pin it down. Here's the other thing. Every single landowner, every single one who comes to me for a pipeline agreement and even a roadway, but let's just stick with pipelines for now. Everyone tells me how important this is and how quickly the company wants to get this done. Every single person. So landowners, please understand, when you're told that, please understand that everyone is being told that, not just you. And with many of these other things that you're being told, it's the same thing they're telling everybody. And, from me, I get the clients, we get these calls, somebody comes in, we talk, we have a telephone conference call, and they're telling me what the landman says, and it's almost that I could kind of stop them and just go ahead and kind of repeat. I know what they're going to say because it's the same thing that all the landmen say. Same thing. It's always the same thing. It's like a script. So you have to understand, and not to be taken the wrong way, but most circumstances aren't these special circumstances. This is the same techniques. It's the same speech, it's the same information, the same promises that are given to people, not just in Susquehanna County, Bradford County, Wyoming, Tioga, Potter, McKean, Elk, Mercer, Bradford, Allegheny, Westmoreland, Greene. It's not the same thing. It is the same thing. It's not that you're special. This same type of speeches are going on everywhere. And I can tell you this because I hear it. I hear it from the landmen when I talk to them. I hear it from my clients who talked to the landmen. Again, the landmen work for the company. They've been doing this a very long time. Companies have been doing it all across the country. Most of these landmen are traveling from here to here, project to project. They've dealt with landowners all over, and they've evolved to become very, very effective. They know what they want you to hear, or what you want to hear. And that's what they're going to give you. I am Attorney Doug Clark. This is All Things Marcellus, here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. and talking about landmen. And I will get to my ultimate point here. And I'm going to jump to it now. So I got this landowner who I represented, and we did this agreement, but we were limited in leverage of what we could do. So what do we do in those cases? What do? I explain to my client, here's where our limitations are. Here's what I think we can do. Let's get in and out as quickly and as efficiently as we can, but get you the best possible agreement with the somewhat limited leverage we have in this particular case. We'll still make it better. We can do it cost effectively because we know what we can do. I know what I can do. I know what I can't do in this type of case because I've seen many of them. I've been involved in many of them. So we're going to maximize this. We're going to do it efficiently, and we're going to get out, and you'll be set to go, providing that you approve everything. Okay, so we do that. Everything goes good. It's not something that was a long, drawn-out negotiation. We were very limited in leverage. There wasn't a lot to work on. But we made the agreement better. So here we go. Landowner-client signs. Everything is good. And this is a couple years ago. So now I get a correspondence, or I actually get an email from the company representative saying, hey, we need to do something. We want to add another line. We want to modify this pipeline right-of-way agreement that you did for this gentleman a couple years ago. So I said, okay, send me the paperwork. Let me contact the client, see what's going on. So as they send me the paperwork, I see that they want to run a pipeline in an easement that we've already done to an above-ground valve site on this individual's property. So I said, boy, that's weird because in 90% and sometimes more of the right-of-way agreements, not sometimes, but in 90% probably we work on, and probably a little higher than that, I guess I should say. The clients have agreements that do not allow for above-ground valve sites unless we specifically negotiate that as part of the agreement. So I go back, I look at the old agreement, I say, geez, how are they going to run a pipeline to an above-ground valve site when this gentleman's pipeline right-of-way agreement does not allow that, doesn't permit it, doesn't authorize an above-ground valve site? So we find out then, talk to the client and say, hey, got this and not sure if you wanted me to help you with this. Here's what's going on. But I'm a little bit confused because they're saying that they want to run a pipeline to this above ground valve site that's in the easement that we worked on before. And your original pipeline right-of-way easement agreement does not allow for above ground valve sites within your easement area. Well, he says, yeah, I know that, but I did another agreement for an above-ground valve site. And he says, actually, not only that, I did also enter into another pipeline right-of-way agreement with this company sometime after the one that you worked on. And I said, well, geez, that's okay. And obviously, if that's what you want to do, but, just curious, why didn't you give me a call? Could have just at least maybe given you some advice or maybe answered any questions. And he said, well, the landman told us that, hey, since we did this other agreement with you, we'll just go ahead and use the same exact paperwork, and we'll do that for this new pipeline. And I said, well, okay, that makes sense, I guess. And so we just went ahead and did it. Well, stay tuned. I'm up against the break, but I'm going to explain why that was a problem. And the landman acting like they're doing this big favor for the landowner. Oh, well, we'll just give you the same agreement before and you don't have to incur any expenses. Well, I'm going to explain what the problem is with that. I'm going to explain it when we get right back. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday from 8 to 9. And again, back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark, Clark Law Firm. We're here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And just a reminder, you can check out the show. Go to pagasleaseattorney.com. And with regard to today's show, you're definitely going to go to pipelineattorney.com. Please know that we are closing in. I know I've been saying this for a while, but really am closing in on revamping these sites and releasing the new sites. It's going to be a new format. It's going to be a lot more information. I'm updating information. It's been a big project, and we're getting really, really close. So when you go to the site, it's already looking a little bit different. We're moving some things. We're going to be shifting over to the new sites. But these sites are really designed to give landowners information. Good quality, credible information. Things that you should be thinking about. Things that you should be aware of. Definitely go check them out. The new sites too, we're going to have the radio shows back up there. They're going to have them archived dating back to August of 2010. So a lot of great information. I'm kind of rewriting some of the older blogs that I did, bringing some things up to speed because things are evolving. Things are changing all the time. So we want to get some good quality, fresh information out there to landowners. So if you've been to the sites, haven't been there in a while, we're going to get these new ones up. The gas one's going to come up first, and hoping by the end of the month or the end of the year, but if not, very soon after that. So make sure that you're checking out pagasleaseattorney.com and pipelineattorney.com. And as I said before, as I've been working on these sites, it's got me, I start getting fired up. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, I'm getting up every morning early, staying late, working on the sites, and so many things just kind of rush back to me over the experience since, starting around 2007, negotiating with the first gas lease for the family's property. These things are coming back to me and the experiences, so adding more to that. But what's amazing to me is the things still continue today. The same things that we saw in 2007 and 2008 are still occurring. The same mistakes that landowners were making in 2007, 8, and even earlier are still occurring today. We need to correct that. You need to be, landowners, we need to get you information. We need to make sure that you're not falling into these traps. Promises of riches and future money is the best kind of weapon, that they're a tactic, whatever we want to call it, that the landman has. So please remember, they work for the company, and promises of future riches. Hey, that's great. I want every one of my clients to be rich. I want to protect every one of my clients' properties as much as we possibly can. I want to do all of those things. But what we need to know is, realistically, what can you expect? What can we do? And how can we make these agreements better? Now, back to my example here. Landman, I do an agreement for a client of mine, pipeline right-of-way agreement. We were limited in the leverage that we had in that agreement because the line was going to be authorized under the gas lease. But even though we were limited, we were able to do some really good things. And we changed a lot of the terms of the agreement, and we're able to do some other things to help the property owner. But understanding that under these circumstances, we were never going to be able to get more compensation. So we want to make sure that we're getting the best agreement that we possibly can. But we also understand that, hey, we're not going to be able to sit there and go back and forth on compensation. We're not going to be able to do some of these more unique, special things that we can do in some agreements because we don't have the leverage in this case that we have in some other cases. So, do a pretty good agreement for this landowner, actually very good for what these circumstances were. And now here we go. New agreement comes up. I talk to my older client. I say, hey, what's going on? He tells me that he entered into an above-ground valve agreement for the easement area that we negotiated for the first pipeline. So let me explain this a little better. We have a pipeline agreement that says there's a 50-foot easement agreement. And in that 50-foot easement area running across the property, there could only be one pipeline and no above-ground valve sites. Well, I find out now there's an above-ground valve site. And I say to the client, hey, your agreement precluded that. You weren't allowed to have it. He says, well, I went ahead and I entered into an above-ground valve site agreement. Well, I've now seen it, and one of the biggest problems is in my opinion, there was certainly more money that was available. In my mind, certainly more money based upon experience and working with this company and many other cases. So the problem that comes in is if the landowner is scared to call for whatever reason or thinks, hey, there's not a lot of money here, don't want to incur any expense. I couldn't understand that more. I fully understand that. But that's the conversation we have right at the beginning. Hey, look, give you an example. They're only offering you, and this is just, I'm throwing this number out there. They're only offering you $2,000 for what they're proposing. Well, you don't want to eat up that $2,000 in legal fees. Who would? I wouldn't. You shouldn't want to. But let's have a conversation to talk about, are there things that you can do, and let's make sure that you're protected. Let's just cover these minimal bases that are super important and we'll get in and get out efficiently and make sure we do the best we can for you, and we're not going to eat away at those fees. Or, you know what? Maybe you can say no. Or maybe by a call and you tell me, well, they're offering me $2,000. I say, you know what? I just did several others, or I just finished another agreement in a similar case, and I received $5,000. Well, we've already done the work. So we're going to be able to do this efficiently and maybe jump that money up there. And maybe the offer that they gave you didn't have indemnification, where if there was an injury or an accident, that you may have some sort of liability or be exposed to liability or have to defend yourself. And maybe we could, with an hour time, get you covered for some of these essentials that you need, but recognizing that we're not going to be able to change the money or change the world here, but let's make sure that you're protected the best we can for this type of an agreement. So by not calling me, I'm pretty confident that this individual lost out on some compensation, and there were some terms that we could have added, and maybe they matter in the future, maybe they don't, we'll see, but some things that we could have done pretty quickly and efficiently to make sure that this person was protected, for example, from liability issues and things of that nature. Now, it gets worse. I find out also that I was saying before that the landowner entered into another pipeline right-of-way agreement with the same company that I worked with on his behalf. I represented him as the first time. Well, there was some gap in between. So, remember I said the first negotiation, we didn't have a lot of leverage. So what did? We had an honest conversation. Look, here's what I can do for you. Let's get in and get out. Let's get the best possible agreement, but understanding that this doesn't need to be a drawn out process, and won't be, because we're limited in what we can do. If a negotiation takes a longer time, if an individual's legal bill is higher than what the typical legal bill would be for this type of representation, there's generally one reason for that, and that is because you have leverage and we're able to obtain a lot more benefits, including compensation and terms for your agreement. So that any increase in your expense or the time spent is going to result in a direct benefit in almost all cases that is going to outweigh, and many times significantly outweigh, any increase in expense. So your expense may be in negotiations, might take, going back to the beginning of the show today as an early example, your expenses may be a little higher in a case that the offer went from $25,000 to $100,000. It's not going to be based on percentage of legal fees, aren't going to be based on any percentage of increase with me. But by negotiating, going back and forth, maneuvering to get $75,000 more dollars to make this go from $25,000 to $100,000, well, there's some more time involved. But as a result of that more time, your offer went from $25,000 to $100,000, as opposed to the gentleman who has a $10,000 offer, who has no leverage, and say, look, here's what you have. You don't have the leverage. Maybe we can work with location. Maybe we can solidify location. There's some things we can do. Let's get in and out efficiently and get you the best agreement. But we don't need to haggle over some of these terms that we can't get and compensation that we're not going to be able to increase. But the key is to understand where you are. You have to understand it. And you know what? The company landman is not going to explain it to you in the way that you need to know. They're not going to do it. Please, please, please understand who they work for. They're not going to do it. So I find out, client landowner says, well, yeah, landman came back a year or two later and said, hey, we want to put another pipeline right away on your property. And said, you know what? You don't even need to get an attorney because we'll just give you the same terms that you had the first time. Landowner says, well, geez, that's good. I don't want to. Nobody, and who does? I don't want to incur any legal or additional expenses if I don't have to. and you're going to give me the same agreement. I had this attorney. He represented me. I think it was a very good agreement. And so, okay, that sounds great. Well, the situation, though, in this, say, year or two between the first agreement and the second agreement, well, there's a lot of differences here. And by not having that discussion, that initial discussion to determine, can you say yes or no? What is the compensation offered? Do we think that there may be some flexibility? How far do we want to push this? How hard do we want to push this based on your individual circumstances in life, as well as this particular agreement? All of those factors and all of those concerns and issues that you need to be thinking about. We didn't have that discussion. So what happened was the landman says, okay, and they sit there. You can just see them sitting there in their meetings and getting ready to say, well, listen, let's just go out. We'll go out and we'll say, hey, listen, we'll give you that same agreement that Doug Clark did. Won't cost you any more money in legal fees. Here you go. Same thing. We'll just switch a map and you got it and we'll move on. Well, here's the thing. They don't tell the landowner. And why should they? Because they work for the company. They don't tell the landowner, well, this particular right-of-way agreement that we're working on or we're asking you to sign, or this easement, it's going to actually carry third-party or foreign gas. So you actually don't have to agree to this. Or even, like I said before, even if your lease does allow it, it doesn't mean you have to sign a right-of-way agreement. So you don't have to, like on our first case when there was a lease there, if the gentleman didn't sign a right-of-way agreement, well, they could put it in under the lease. And in this particular case, we already knew the location. It was going from a well site. There was no reason to really have any of this great debate and negotiation. Well, this new line is totally different. Totally different circumstance that the landowner could say no to. Could say no. So, does the landman tell them that? No. The landowner, not terribly sophisticated in all of these, this process and how things work, says, well, okay, I had an agreement before. I thought it was okay. It was good. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing. Well, the landowner should have known that they could say no. The landowner also should have had a discussion regarding, hey, look, I think there's probably more compensation, potentially significantly more compensation. And oh, by the way, since we did these first agreements, there's been a lot of items and terms that I can get now that over time have evolved to become better agreements. So if you signed an agreement 2 or 3 years ago, just because you liked the terms then, there might be better terms available today than what there was at that time. So from my perspective, what am I doing? I'm always working to get the best possible agreement with every one of my clients. I'm also always learning, getting experience from every single negotiation that I'm involved in. And what can we do to make the best next one better? What can we do to maximize your circumstance? But again, I'm not rogue acting on my own. You're the individual who makes all the decisions. It is about getting the information to you and explaining what your options are. The landman is not going to do that. Again, why would they when they work for the company? So I see this older agreement, which was a very good agreement for a pipeline going to the well site that they were a part of, that we didn't have good, strong leverage to negotiate, and it was going to be at a location that was acceptable, and we had the map, so we were good to go. That was the best we could do. Let's get it out and get it in and out efficiently. But now, this new agreement that unfortunately the individual signed, we could have done a lot more. And in that case, with a phone call, could have, and I can't obviously talk in certainties here, but certainly could have, and I really believe, resulted in tens of thousands or possibly over $100,000 more in compensation, and absolutely better terms than what were in better, when I terms, I mean language, than what was in the first agreement. All right, I'm way over. I'm going to talk more about this in the last segment. We got a short last segment. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. I'm going to be back after this break. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And remember, the company landman works for the company. I'll be right back. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. And I apologize if I'm a little too fired up here today. But like I said, I was going to run a rerun today. Got a lot of things going on. But having my coffee is just getting fired up more and more this morning. And wanted to get this information out there. As I do these websites, it comes back and it comes back and it comes back. And it's been the same thing that I have been preaching since the beginning, is that landowners need to get quality information from people who they can trust, people who have their interest in mind, not the company interest. And because people are nice, because landowners are kind, because they are friendly, because they are loyal, and because they respect people that they're dealing with, companies and company landmen can prey on those qualities and end up having landowners sign agreements that they shouldn't be signing. Agreements that not only, and it's not all about money, but if you have a choice to sign an agreement for $10,000 or $15,000, the identical agreement, who is going to sign the $10,000 one? So if you can ask some questions and get more money, why not do that? Also, it's about terms. It's about the language. It's about how many pipelines. When can these pipelines, when will this agreement terminate? There's so many. Well, how's reclamation? There's so many terms. I mean, so many. There's times we had 6, 7, 8 pages to agreements of terms. And again, it depends on your leverage. But the landman is never going to tell you about your leverage. So, in this case, the landman goes out, acts like he's doing the gentleman a favor, saying, you don't even need to call Doug Clark. You can just sign this document, and it's going to be the same thing, and you'll be all set. I'm not saying this because I'm mad the gentleman didn't call me in any way at all. I just wish that the person would have called me so I could explain what the options were and allow them to make that decision. I am not here, and nor should any attorney be. I'm certainly not here to rip off anyone. I'm always striving to do better and represent, and better, in agreements, and represent my clients to the best of my ability. And if I can't do something, then I'm going to tell my client, look, I don't think I can do this, or the company's not going to agree to that. So if the gentleman would have called me and said, hey, I have a new pipeline right-of-way agreement being offered to me, they'll give me the same terms as the first agreement. Is there any reason? Do we need to talk? Do I need any assistance? And then I would say, well, let me look at this. Let's talk about this. And it's not about to generate a legal fee. It's about, okay, here's the thing, sir. The first discussion, the first agreement, as if you may recall, we had very little leverage there. So although it's a good agreement, it's a good agreement for a line that's going directly to wells that you're a part of, okay? And even like on a neighboring property. So we were very restricted. So we got you the best agreement we could. We got in and out, and you got a good agreement. However, this new agreement they're asking for, you don't have to say yes. And again, I want to stress this. Even if it's allowed under your lease, you don't have to say yes. But that's a whole other discussion. And sometimes, in a lot of cases, it's in most people's best interest to reach an agreement they find, but that's their choice. So in this case, it was in your best interest, as we discussed, to reach an agreement and maximize your money. But this new case, this new right-of-way, you absolutely don't have to say no. And where they paid you the bare bones minimum compensation that they would pay to everybody, that's what you got the first time because we couldn't negotiate and make it any better. But the new agreement, we get more compensation for these routinely. I can't promise you what happens here, but I can tell you routinely we get more compensation. I can also tell you, unlike the other one, you're still where you would still see a pipeline, you're not going to see a pipeline unless you agree to this. So maybe you don't want to agree. And also, remember, you've already agreed to a pipeline. So your property is already now in a different circumstance because now you have the burden of an existing easement. And by agreeing to this next offer, if you do, you're going to have another burden on your property. So that's something else to think about. But most importantly, you can say no. And if you want to say no, you can, or you could say no and negotiate more compensation. And this isn't about dragging it out. Let's just hypothetically say you're offered $50,000. Remember, they're offering you the same amount of money for an agreement that you could say no to, that's not allowed, that's going to transport third-party gas, and they're offering you that same amount of money for yet another easement on your property, and one that's going to be much longer and a bigger burden on your property. And we know that we can probably get more money, and then let's talk about how much you want to push or not push. But then also, that agreement that we did the first time, we were limited in leverage. So this new agreement, if you want to do it, there's a lot of other terms, or several other terms, that we can probably add to this agreement. And when I say probably, I can tell you in this case very confidently, we could add to this. So this agreement will be better. So the landman coming out to you and saying, oh, well, hey, we'll just use this same agreement. You don't need to have any more expenses. Just go ahead and sign here. Well, yeah, that's maybe sounded good, and obviously it must have. But the person, in this case, almost, and again, you can't predict the future, but I can say that if they wanted to negotiate and they wanted to do it, I can say very, very confidently, there would have been more compensation. And it would have the compensation far exceeded any type of legal expense in this type of case. Far exceeded. Also, the terms of the agreement, the language, the addendum would have been stronger and better. It would have been stronger and better because over the years, I'm always striving to make every agreement better, and we can make some strides sometimes. So I know in this case I can get you a better terms, but also because of your leverage ability here and the leverage that you have, we have the ability to make this agreement better as far as the language goes. So you signed a very good agreement or a strong agreement the first time for that circumstance. But this new circumstance is totally different. So I would never just recommend you sign that old agreement because you can do much better. And here's the reasons why. However, landowner client, if you want to do that, you are more than free to just go ahead and do that. I'm not here to try to generate work. We're very blessed and fortunate to be very busy and very proud of that. We're not here and would never just represent you or try to get you to do something to increase some sort of legal fee. To me, that would be theft. I won't do that. Nobody should do that. So we're looking at, here's what the new circumstances are, and you make your decision. And I have those discussions with people. Unfortunately, and this is the only time I've seen this. That's why I'm talking about it here today. That's why I'm doing the show today. You don't generally see this. And so this individual, I've now since had this discussion, is saying, oh man, you know what? I made a mistake. Okay, what can we do? That's fine. People make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. What do? We learn from them. And that's the purpose of today's show. Learn from, not only maybe you made mistakes, but learn from other people's mistakes. Let's all learn from, and what's nice is we don't have to learn from our own mistakes. We can learn from mistakes that other people have made. So when that landman comes out there and they say, well, let's do this or let's do that, let's do this, whether it's me or somebody, you need to get a landowner perspective, because you could lose out on, and I'm not exaggerating, at times hundreds of thousands of dollars at times based on calls and understanding where you're at. Do not make those mistakes. And again, you can make the agreement better. Make sure you're getting good quality professional advice for you, the landowner. All right, I'm up against it, and I hope everyone has a merry and wonderful Christmas and have a great week and a great Christmas. Be back next Sunday from 8 to 9.